During the first minute of any video on wartime food, there's always that moment where a viewer thinks, is this actually going to teach me something new, or is it just another repeat of the same rationing facts? So let me speak directly to those who love history as deeply as I do. During World War II, families across Europe, the United States and Commonwealth nations had to rethink even the simplest comforts. The snacks and treats we take for granted today, cookies, cakes, candy bars, were nearly impossible to make. Sugar was rationed. Milk was scarce. White flour was prioritized for soldiers. Yet people still craved small comforts, and the creativity that came out of those kitchens deserves recognition. That's why this guide digs into what I call wartime junk foods, born out of nothing more than desperation, ingenuity, and whatever was left in the pantry. These aren't myths or romanticized nostalgia. They're the real foods people leaned on to maintain morale when supply chains collapsed. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you never miss content exploring the legacy of survival and the reality behind historical resilience. One of the most surprising wartime treats came from carrots. With sugar rationed, governments encouraged households to grate carrots, cook them down and mix them with a bit of leftover syrup or fruit juice. When chilled, the mixture set into a chewy, sweet bar. It wasn't chocolate, but it gave families, especially children, a psychological moral boost. If you apply this today, you can recreate a similar bar by slowly reducing grated carrots with apple juice until thick, shaping it into squares and chilling it. This not only connects you to a historical practice, but teaches you how to stretch ingredients during a crisis. With apples out of reach and flour reserved for the military, families learned to use crackers made from alternative grains or ground root vegetables as the base for a pie. The filling came from water boiled with vinegar, lemon essence, and whatever sweetener someone could barter. The shocking part is that soldiers returning home swore it tasted like a real apple pie. Today, if you want to understand survival baking, you can use thin sliced zucchini or even firm green pumpkin, simmered with lemon juice and cinnamon as a substitute filling. With a crust made from oats and mashed potatoes, you have a near-perfect replica. Cocoa became nearly impossible to obtain by mid-war, so families made a drink by roasting barley or chicory until nearly burnt, then brewing it like coffee. When mixed with a bit of saccharin or honey, it mimicked the bitterness of chocolate. It wasn't perfect, but, it gave people the feeling of returning to normal life for a few minutes. If you want to try this today, just lightly roast barley in a dry pan, steep it, and add just a hint of molasses. It becomes a lesson in how quickly psychological comfort can be improvised when luxury items vanish. How families stretched dried fruit into homemade taffy. Raisins and prunes weren't rationed as tightly because they kept well, so they became the basis for makeshift taffy. Families simmered them, mashed them, and reduced them until sticky, then pulled the mixture by hand as it cooled. Kids loved the process, and adults appreciated that nothing went to waste. Modern preppers can replicate this by reducing dates or figs into a thick paste and pulling it while warm. This practice really reinforces the principle of extracting maximum value from preserved foods. How potato cakes replaced cookies when flour ran out. Mashed potato mixed with a bit of oats, salt, and any sweetener became a flat, pan-fried snack that tasted surprisingly close to a soft cookie. This was especially popular in Britain and Poland, where food shortages hit hardest. If you're studying survival cooking, try frying leftover mashed potatoes with a spoonful of honey and spices. It teaches you exactly how wartime households use texture and heat to mimic luxury foods. Now, families would often turn to roasted chickpeas as a bit of a stand-in for those candy-coated nuts, you know. Chickpeas, when they're roasted and just lightly sweetened, were handed out to children as a snack that resembled those sugared nuts we all wished we had. With real nuts being, well, simply unavailable, this little trick gave both some nutrition and a bit of enjoyment in the same bite. And honestly, you can do the very same thing today. Just roast some chickpeas with a splash of fruit concentrate. It's a good reminder that protein-rich snacks don't always have to rely on expensive ingredients. So, let's talk about how emergency popcorn balls actually became party treats. Popcorn wasn't rationed, you see, so families would combine popped corn with boiled-down syrups made from fruit peels, molasses, or, believe it or not, even carrot juice. These sticky balls, well, they quickly became a popular treat at community gatherings, and honestly were often the only party food available. For preppers today, this is a perfect example of using bulk grains creatively in a crisis. Now, here's how beet syrup ended up replacing caramel in countless recipes. Beets were processed into syrup long before industrial sugar-making was restored. Families would pour beet syrup over toasted bread, roasted grains, or dried fruit to create caramel-like snacks. If you want to understand ration-era resourcefulness, just try boiling down beet juice until it thickens into a sticky syrup. This really demonstrates just how far people had to go to approximate sweetness. Let's move on to how fried bread scraps became a treasured household junk food. With every crumb precious, families would fry stale bread in leftover fat, sprinkle it with the smallest pinch of sweetener they could spare, and treat it like a dessert. The taste, well, it was rich, comforting, and deeply tied to the memory of pre-war life. In any modern survival situation, frying stale bread with a touch of honey really does replicate that experience and teaches the value of eliminating waste. These 9 junk foods aren't just curiosities, they're blueprints for resilience. They reveal how people protected morale and creativity even when the pantry was nearly empty. So, if you want more historical deep dives and practical survival applications, subscribe to the channel and share this guide so others can explore the legacy of endurance hidden in everyday food.